Hail Satan!
Hail Satan!
And welcome once again, everyone, to this episode of Satanism Today as we enter the year 2002 here on freethoughtradio.com. My name is David Harris. I'm once again being joined by High Priest of the Church of Satan, Peter Gilmore. High Priest Gilmore, thank you once again for joining us.
Oh, thanks for having me again.
And it came to my attention as we were going through the production processes for the first show and through some of my contact with the folk at Free Thought Radio that a lot of the listenership of Free Thought Radio might not completely understand the Church of Satan and Satanism in general. And so we both thought that it might be a good idea to do an entire show on the basic tenets and philosophies of Satanism and the Church of Satan. And that's really what this is going to be about today. We're going to give our listeners an overview, an introduction, if you will, to Satanism and the Church of Satan, its philosophies, its beliefs, and its practices. And so, I thought we would start by asking just the most basic of questions, and that is, what is Satanism?
Yes, that's the $24,000 question. Basically, Satanism is the world's first carnal religion. And by carnal, I mean a fleshy religion, one that absolutely denies the existence of any spiritual dimension to human existence whatsoever. Instead of turning over the coin, as some people might think, where Satanism might be considered an anti-Christianity or an anti-God and worshiping their devil, Satanism has thrown out Christianity altogether, all of their paradigms and all of their mythologies, and we see them as being irrelevant to mankind. That essentially, when Anton LaVey started the Church of Satan in 1966, he synthesized Satanism as an organization and a philosophy for the first time in history that is combining elements from past philosophies and literature and other religions in a mode towards celebrating man as he is, the human animal as a beast, not as something that needs to be idealized or in some way improved, accepted as a carnal animal that functions best in harmony with nature. And that's really the basis of Satanism. It's the simplest way of approaching it. Now, people always say, well, that actually sounds pretty good. Like, we could accept that, enjoying man, that sense, but then why do you have to bring Satan into it? And I figured, let me read Anton LaVey's very specific response to that. After over 25 years of getting his ideas before the public, some people still can't figure Anton LaVey out, even after reading his books. They say, it's a wonderful philosophy, but why Satan? Why can't you just call it humanism or something like that? So LaVey said, my brand of Satanism is the ultimate conscious alternative to herd mentality and institutionalized thought. It is a studied, contrived set of principles and exercises designed to prevent and liberate from the contagion of mindlessness which destroys innovation. Here are some reasons why it is called Satanism. It is most stimulating under that name, and self-discipline and motivation are easier under stimulating conditions. It means the opposition, and it epitomizes all symbols of nonconformity. And it represents the strongest ability to turn a liability into an advantage, to turn alienation into exclusivity. In other words, the reason it's called Satanism is because it's fun, it's accurate, and it's productive. Now, I'll add to that, too, that what we found is that the word Satan and the symbol of Satan ends up being a filter for people who won't take off what we call their good guy badges. And a good guy badge is an attitude of self-righteousness that people have, that they always want to define themselves as the one who is in the good guy, the one who is the right person, who is there always, the one who should get the nod from like the inertia of the universe as being the proper course of action. They're afraid of taking on the adversarial role, the role of one who's going to accuse or question. And so being Satanism, it filters people like that out. Even people who might on some level be like us, if they are afraid to take on the name Satan, and that symbol is something close to their heart, then they've got a stumbling block. They've got a holdout where they can't deal with their animal nature. They always have to purify themselves and be considered goody-goodies on some level. And we Satanists don't have that problem. And so it really functions excellently as a filter for anybody who would have that kind of difficulty with us.
Ultimately, right now, let's put to rest the fact that we don't worship little men in red suits with horns poking out of their heads and little tails hanging out of their posteriors, hanging out in some fiery domain with a pitchfork, poking at the lost souls of this world.
Well, it's true that so many people confuse Satanism with devil worship. Devil worship you'd have to define as a heresy of Christianity. Somebody who believes in their God and their devil and decides that they're going to worship the bad guy in that whole philosophical model. We've thrown out that entire model. We don't believe in their God. We don't believe in their devil. We essentially would worship ourselves because we are our own gods. We don't accept any kind of external deity. So we're atheists, we Satanists. You know, the only God in our universe is ourselves, and we know that we are not some kind of supernatural entity. Now, interestingly enough, Anton LaVey was always asked about this during his life. Like, what do you think about Satan? And in a book called Popular Witchcraft by John Fritcher, Anton LaVey wrote a monologue where he addressed the issue of what he considers Satan to be. And I will read this because it couldn't be clearer, because people over the years have often heard say, oh, well, he really believed that there was some kind of satanic entity and that, you know, this was part of his belief system and it was kept secret. And having known Anton LaVey personally, I can tell you that isn't true. So he says, I don't feel that raising the devil in an anthropomorphic sense is quite as feasible as theologians or metaphysicians would like to think. I have felt his presence, but only as an exteriorized extension of my own potential, as an alter ego or evolved concept that I have been able to exteriorize. With a full awareness, I can communicate with the semblance, this creature, this demon, this personification that I see in the eyes of the symbol of Satan, the goat of Mendes, as I commune with it before the altar. None of these is anything more than a mirror image of that potential I perceive in myself. I have this awareness that the objectification is in accord with my own ego. I'm not deluding myself that I'm calling something that is disassociated or exteriorized from myself the Godhead. This force is not a controlling factor that I have no control over. The satanic principle is that man will fully control his destiny, and if he doesn't, some other man, a lot smarter than he is, will. Satan is, therefore, an extension of one's psyche or volitional essence, so that the extension can sometimes converse and give directions through the self in a way that mere thinking of the self as a single unit cannot. In this way, it does help to depict in an externalized way the devil per se. The purpose is to have something of an idolatrous, objective nature to commune with. However, man has connection, contact, control. The notion of an exteriorized God Satan is not new. So he's really taking an old tradition, an old concept, but keeping it based on the fact that this is a creation of yourself. It's a symbol of something that's in you that you pull outside of yourself and look at as an exteriorized part of your own potential. But it's not an entity. It's not a deity to be worshipped.
Now this leads me to another question that probably a lot of the listeners have had is, if Satanism is a religion of the self, as it were, and not rather a cabal of people worshiping an anthropomorphic devil, as it were, why the need for an organized church?
Well, the idea of having an organized church is not like a church as would function in a standard religious concept. Our church, in fact, is a cabal. That the organization is simply a way for people of like mind, on some level, to find others who might have interesting passions that are in common. It's not a way of trying to create some kind of fellowship or bulwark against the world at large, because we Satanists feel completely at home in the world. We are not looking to pull ourselves out of existence, because we are part of existence. Most churches are ways of gathering people to set them in opposition with the world around them, to sort of pull themselves out as being somehow elect or different. And we don't have that need in the Church of Satan. So it's not a standard church as most people might define it. It's really a way of finding other folks who might have some similar interests and maybe pursuing it with them. Or, on another level, it can just be a way of saying, I'm supporting a philosophy that I agree with, and I'm going to support an organization that is keeping that philosophy out there for other people who, once reading it, will see that it is natural to them. So the idea of the organization is not to provide activities for people, as most churches do. It's not a place to go and have weekly rituals. You don't need a church to do that. And that's why in Satanism we don't build churches. We don't have structures all over the place where everybody goes to gather on a weekly basis. We ritualize in our own homes, because ritual is something that's very personal. So Satanism is geared towards individualism and people finding and fulfilling their own passions, not trying to organize people in some uniform sense so that they are all in some lockstep so that they can define themselves that way to the world at large, as really most religions do.
And we will be back on Satanism Today here on freethoughtradio.com with High Priest Peter Gilmore talking about the 9 satanic statements, the 11 satanic rules of the earth, as well as greater and lesser magic. Stick around. And welcome back to Satanism Today here on freethoughtradio.com. We are joined once again this week by High Priest of the Church of Satan, Peter Gilmore. We're talking about the basic philosophies of Satanism and the Church of Satan. Now, many of us as free thinkers have been indoctrined for years with Christianity, and of course one of the staples of Christianity are the 10 Commandments. The Church of Satan does not have 10 Commandments. We do instead have the 9 satanic statements. And these are direct quotes from Dr. Anton Szandor Lopez's Satanic Bible. And the first satanic statement is that Satan represents indulgence instead of abstinence.
Well, essentially, being the very first satanic statement, it's important, as that points out our very basic approach to life, that we are here to live and enjoy our existence. This isn't a vale of tears or a world of horrors. This is the only life that we have, and as Satanists, our main purpose is to enjoy this life. It points out our roots in Epicureanism, which is really one of the base philosophies of Satanism, which was it's a rational hedonism. It's a way of looking at the world and finding your pleasures, but not by losing control. So if you indulge instead of abstaining, you're enjoying your life. Of course, there's a corollary to that, and that Satanism supports indulgence, not compulsion. A compulsion would be like an addiction, something that you have no control over, whereas an indulgence is something that you have absolute control over. So Satanism sees the world as like a giant smorgasbord of experiences of all types that you pick and choose among to your heart's content for as long as you live.
Statement number 2. Satan represents vital existence instead of spiritual pipe dreams.
And that, too, is again a corollary to the first one, because vital existence is living fully, not stinting in your enjoyment of the world, finding exactly how you can take the best advantage of the kind of things that you enjoy, and avoiding spiritual pipe dreams. Now, Satanism does not believe in the spiritual at all. Most religions promote the idea of a heaven, and that's where the goodness will happen to you. You can have a miserable existence, but after you die, in the afterlife, that's when you get your reward. And that's a pipe dream. That's a spiritual pipe dream. It's a complete fantasy as far as we're concerned. Satanists believe that this is the only life that you have. There is no afterlife. So there is no heaven of glory bright. There is no hell where sinners roast. Here and now is either your day of torment if you let it be that way, or your day of joy and glory and indulgence. So we promote the idea of finding a way to enjoy your life and not putting on sackcloth and ashes like most of these spiritual types do and having a miserable time.
Statement number 3. Satan represents undefiled wisdom instead of hypocritical self-deceit.
This is actually a mode of approaching how you would live your life. Undefiled wisdom would be an understanding of how things really function, not clouded by some kind of system that's artificial, meant to give and make sense out of what appears to be a chaos. We Satanists want to really control nature, and to control nature you have to understand it. And so undefiled wisdom is the only key to actually having that ability. Hypocritical self-deceit is trying to fool yourself into some kind of complacency by creating a false picture of what reality is, and in essence claiming that you have all of the answers. As Satanists, we know that our understanding of existence is limited, and we do the best we can to keep learning more, to always keep our minds open, and to function in such a way that we're always moving forward and increasing our wisdom and understanding.
Statement number 4. Satan represents kindness to those who deserve it instead of love wasted on ingrates.
Yes, that's our basic reply to the general spiritual doctrine of altruism, which believes that we should sacrifice ourselves to others. Satanism says you earn love or hatred from people around you. It's not something that's given unconditionally. And there are other philosophies that share that with us. Ayn Rand's objectivism also agrees on that point, that you don't give your love to people who haven't earned it. And that's really something that I think most people would really feel is part of the way that they live. But they've generally been taught that they should just love everybody. And it's not possible. We think that anyone who tries to do that is fooling themselves. That you can't just meet somebody on the street and really feel a genuine love. Because love is a passion. Love is a response to something that you see in somebody else that you admire. You can't just love anybody. Just like you can't hate anybody. Hate is a passion that's equal to love and opposite. And it's something that has to be brought about by extraordinary circumstances.
Statement number 5. Satan represents vengeance instead of turning the other cheek.
Yes, we Satanists believe in the principle of an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. We do not believe that, like Christianity professes, that you should turn the other cheek. Because once you turn your cheek twice, you've run out of cheeks. It's really a waste of time. We're not going to passively be subjected to people who would be out to take advantage of us. We believe that you do unto others as they do unto you.
Statement number 6. Satan represents responsibility to the responsible instead of concern for psychic vampires.
That's actually a very interesting, broad statement. The first part, responsibility to the responsible, points out that we Satanists have a respect for law and order. That we see that as an animal, we are social animals. We construct an entire civilization so that we can get the most out of the lives that we have, because the lives are limited. We don't have some eternal afterlife. So this is a way that humans can get along with each other. If you have responsibility towards those who are responsible, then you can really create a civilization that can enrich the time you have, so that you don't spend all of the time trying to do everything you need for survival. Now, a psychic vampire is a term that Anton LaVey coined, and that's the idea of somebody who tries to foster guilt in a person by giving them material things so that they will feel some kind of emotional bond towards them that essentially isn't really deserved. It's a vampirization of your vital existence, of your very life force, essentially, by somebody who wants to make you have an unmitigated, or an unwarranted, actually, both emotional bond towards them. And so Satanists essentially say that people who approach them like that, we'll put the proverbial stake in their hearts, because we will not put up with that kind of approach.
Statement number 7. Satan represents man as just another animal, sometimes better, more often worse than those that walk on all fours, who, because of his divine spiritual and intellectual development, has become the most vicious animal of all.
Well, that goes to what we were talking about earlier, about we're a carnal religion. We believe that man is an animal. Man is only an animal. There is no spiritual dimension. There's no soul in a body. There's no superior supernatural realm, that everything is part of nature. And man, as an animal, is an animal that can betray his nature. Therefore, he can often be worse than those that walk on all four because he can defy his instincts. What we Satanists feel is that the divine spiritual and intellectual development often makes people totally abnegate all of their instinctual values that would make them live in a healthy way. You don't see animals slaughtering others of their own kind because they disagree over some kind of spiritual issue. The kind of cruelty that we see in our species is unique to man. Often spiritual people say, that's animalistic behavior, and in truth it's not. Animals don't behave that way at all. Only man does. And it's because of the spiritual religions and philosophies that man does such things. So we Satanists feel if we can eject all of those things and reject those concepts that are unnatural, that our species would be better off for the future and the present.
Statement number 8. Satan represents all of the so-called sins, as they all lead to physical, mental, or emotional gratification.
This is a statement that sometimes people get rather confused because they think the so-called sins would be the carnal elements of man that most spiritual religions would point out as being sinful. Now, spiritual religions have worked a great scam that's lasted for thousands of years. They look at man's nature and say, what does he do on a daily basis? Let's call those things sins. So those sins, often called the 7 deadly sins, are basically based on what your natural impulses are. And Satanism says there's nothing wrong with those natural impulses as long as they're indulged in moderation. And so let them be called sins by the Christians and other religions. And we Satanists will partake of them as we see fit in our Epicurean way and have a good time while we're doing it.
And as we wind down this particular segment, we come to the last of the 9 satanic statements. Satan has been the best friend the church has ever had, as he has kept it in business all these years.
Indeed. Since we were just talking about the fact that spiritual religions are a great scam, Satan is the figure that they put up as the one who's always out to chase all of the people that they want in their pulpits. So if you create an adversary who's out to poke your hiney for eternity in a burning hell, and that's of course a great adversary to have. But of course, Satan, in fact, like that, is a myth, and it's really only because they can say that somebody's out to get you who's horrible that you would even think for a moment of adopting those spiritual doctrines which are unnatural. So they need the adversary in order to chase people into their open arms. And as soon as that's taken away, people see that they'd rather be in the arms of the adversary. They'd have a lot more fun.
And we will be back here on Satanism Today. You're listening to Satanism Today on freethoughtradio.com. And welcome back to Satanism Today on freethoughtradio.com. My name is David Harris, joined once again by High Priest of the Church of Satan, Peter Gilmore. And now that we've covered the 9 satanic statements, we're going to flip this thing around and talk about the 9 satanic sins.
Yes, well, sins, of course, in Satanism, people would say, since Satanism is about doing what you want and being an individual, how could you have something like sins? And to tell you the truth, our sins are not like sins in other religions. Their sins are behaviors that are forbidden by a deity for which you'll be punished if you enact them. In Satanism, we have made sins which we think are behaviors that we don't want to do, that if we fall into them, we would try to stop doing them. So they're kind of idiocies or mistakes that we want to eliminate from our lives. They're not some kind of commandments that we have to live according to.
And of course, right at the top of the list, the number 1 satanic sin, as it were, stupidity.
Yes. Well, since Satanists are trying to have undefiled wisdom, certainly stupidity would stand in the way of that. So it's a behavior that we don't want to encourage. And in general, just idiotic behavior is something that really we all find intrudes in our lives. And we certainly don't want to be the ones adding that kind of intrusion into other people's lives. So we are against stupidity in ourselves, and we generally detest having to deal with it in others.
We certainly do. Number 2 on the list of the 9 satanic sins would be pretentiousness.
Oh boy, pretentiousness, yes. Well, we really can't bear to see people who puff themselves up for no good reason. I mean, being pretentious means basically inflating yourself beyond any kind of reason or reality. And Satanists are trying to be grounded in reality. We're down-to-earth people, and we really get very tired of folks who are constantly promoting themselves beyond what they really are. The kind of overhype is endemic to our culture today, and we Satanists find it repellent, whether we see it on television or in advertising, or amongst people who are generally living their lives by trying to puff themselves up into some kind of inflated caricature of reality that they expect you to buy and treat them as if they are whatever this image is. And Satanists want to cut through all of that crap and get to the reality. So pretentiousness is something that we definitely don't cultivate in ourselves, and we really can't, as well as stupidity, bear in dealing with other people.
And moving down the list to number 3 on the list of 9 satanic sins would be solipsism.
Solipsism, philosophically, is an idea that basically you're the only thing that exists. And for Satanists, we kind of take a different spin on it. We see solipsism as meaning we project our own values and concepts on the actions and behaviors of other people. And in that sense, if you do that as a Satanist, you're not really understanding their real motivations and what they're doing. So do not project or assume that other people are doing things for the same kind of reasons that you might be doing them.
One of the 9 satanic sins that was covered in the 9 satanic statements is number 4 on the list, that being self-deceit.
Well, it's emphasized here because it seems to be something that's so common in our species that people want to somehow fool themselves into believing something about themselves that really isn't true. It's something that since it's taught at most mothers' knees, is again something that's rampant, and it stands in the way of our undefiled wisdom, our real understanding of knowing the ropes in any situation, that we can't be deceiving ourselves. The only time that a Satanist would ever really do that is if it was done as some kind of lark or as a joke or to have some kind of fun, but then it's not really self-deceit because you're doing it consciously. You're not deceiving yourself. So that's right out.
Number 5 on the list of the 9 satanic sins, herd conformity.
Yes, as Satanists, we totally cherish the idea of individualism. And we see that there's a great deal of pressure in our society to be as everyone else. And you have to choose what you like according to your own desires. The thing is, if the herd has suddenly come into liking something that you like, as a Satanist, you suddenly don't abandon that simply because it's come into the focus of the herd. These days, the media promotes whatever is meant to be the thing, the what's cool, what's hip. For a Satanist, you don't follow that. You find and decide for yourself whatever is going to have significance for you.
We move down to number 6 on the list of 9 satanic sins, that being lack of perspective.
Well, essentially, lack of perspective is really not, again, understanding what's going on, not seeing either historically or socially a context for all the actions that are taking place. We Satanists really try to understand something of the history of our species so that we can understand how we fit into a situation and how we can take best advantage of it. Because since we're living our lives for our own benefit, to be unaware of such things would put one at a disadvantage for achieving the success in whatever endeavor you're trying to pursue at that point. So having a lack of perspective certainly would be a hindrance to almost any endeavor one would indulge in. And hence it would be a satanic sin.
Number 7 on the list of the 9 satanic sins, forgetfulness of past orthodoxies.
People tend to only understand the flavor of the month or the hit of the moment, and they don't understand what was considered the most formal, accepted values at the time. The orthodoxies of the past, they pass away. They don't remain the same. You see it in fashion. You see it in hairstyle. You see it even in well, certainly in the arts, in music particularly, that's the most rampant place where it happens. And why such a figure as Brian Warner, who, as the persona of Marilyn Manson, has totally based his career on that concept. I mean, the past orthodoxies of say, like Alice Cooper and some of David Bowie's material and others, Brian looks at those and says, people have seen that and it was popular, but they've forgotten all about it, so I'm going to revive it with my own spin on it. And it'll seem new again to the herd because they don't pay attention to any kind of history. And he can make a fortune again off of these people who think suddenly this is all brand new. So as a Satanist, we have to remember what the orthodoxies were so we can see when what cycles round yet again, that we can be ready for it to take advantage of it for our own benefit.
Number 8 on the list of the 9 satanic sins. Counterproductive pride.
The real danger of Satanism, since it promotes individualism, is it really allows certain people to puff themselves up beyond any kind of rational image of what they really are. That people use Satanism as an excuse sometimes to become megalomaniacal, to suddenly take somebody who's really kind of a mediocre person, who they discover Satanism and suddenly they're their own God, so they feel they have to be everybody else's God as well. And really that's unrealistic, and it's laughable, and it's pretentious, which is another sin. And it's really something that you find absolutely reprehensible in having to deal with people who behave that way. Because they're not really being self-critical, which is important to Satanists if they want to actually achieve something. Satanists really try to develop their own talents to the best of their abilities. And in order to do that, you have to maintain an absolutely strong sense of self-criticism, to evaluate everything that you do as harshly as possible, because you're the only one who really understands fully what you're doing.
And that, of course, brings us to the final satanic sin, that being a lack of aesthetics.
Well, we Satanists really want to look at the world and see and appreciate the beauty in it. And having a sense of aesthetics is understanding balance and proportion. If we look into architecture, the concept of the golden mean, which is a ratio and a proportion, that is also something that we see in the actual balance of nature itself, in the way the parts to the whole are related in all living things, and even in inorganic things, in crystal structures and such. That understanding proportions and balance is important to grasping art and architecture and really all of the creations that we as a species can do. Now, we get tired of sloppiness on all this level and just sort of crudeness and lack of any kind of real consideration in design. And so we Satanists try to keep our aesthetic sense in our daily lives as something important, because it brings us pleasure, not only to see the balance and satisfaction of pleasing proportions outside of us, but in ourselves as well. So Satanists will dress comfortably, but dress nicely. They will try to dress in a way that they feel, that shows that they feel good about themselves. That you'll find Satanists out there. You'll often see them because suddenly you look at them and they kind of look like, if there's a couple, they're a spiffy couple, that somehow they've dressed in such a way that it complements whatever natural look they have. They've enhanced it. That there's some consideration there. This whole artistic sense is really part of a Satanist look at the whole universe, is we see the proportions and the pleasantness in nature and in artificial constructs, and we appreciate it outside of ourselves as well as inside of ourselves. So we don't like to see a lack of that.
And we'll be back here on Satanism Today on freethoughtradio.com. I'm David Harris. We'll be back in a bit. And welcome back to Satanism Today here on freethoughtradio.com. My name is David Harris. We're here with High Priest Peter Gilmore discussing the basic philosophies of Satanism for those who may or may not have a firm grasp on what those philosophies are. In addition to the 9 satanic statements and the 9 satanic sins, there are also the 11 Satanic Rules of the Earth.
Well, the rules of the earth, rather than being something about specifically elucidating the philosophy, they're just simply modes of human intercourse that we'd advocate. That we know that people are social species, so we've created these rules as a kind of a general guideline for how we think people should deal with each other.
And first and foremost on the list of Satanic Rules of the Earth would be, do not give opinions or advice unless you are asked.
Now just think of how nice the world would be if that was actually put into practice.
Yes.
So many people want to come up and tell you what they think about what you're doing, when generally speaking, you don't really care. It might be one thing if they were an authority or somebody who could actually offer you some insight into what you're doing. But these days, we've gotten to a point where everybody thinks that they're the center of the universe, and therefore, as I said before, they should be, your center of the universe too. So anything that they think about, you should have to take seriously. And as Satanists, we know that, of course, is not the case. And we really wish that people would practice this idea, because you know how often your day is filled with just moronic people trying to tell you what they think about what you're doing, when it's a total waste of your time and their time.
Number 2 is my personal favorite. Do not tell your troubles to others unless you are sure they want to hear them.
Yeah, well, that's another one. Like, again, think of how beautiful society would be if we had that one in general practice. Really, as a Satanist, you have to understand that, again, it's a personally centered philosophy, and that you're not supposed to be burdening people with your own personal issues. Like, we Satanists are kind of isolationists, that we want to live and let live, but usually we want to keep a distance from people so that we can be free to do what we want. And we know how annoying it is when somebody comes up to you and starts to try to give you their sad, sad story. And you really just don't care. And that shocks people. That's actually one of the things that's one of the most shocking things that Satanists do, is when somebody sits there and acts like, well, you must be after me, you want to convert me, you must care about me on some level. And as a Satanist, you just go, nope, you're mediocre, you don't matter to me, like I don't care if you live or die.
Number 3 on the list of 11 Satanic Rules of the Earth. When in another's lair, show him respect or else don't go there.
Well, exactly. Now, your lair is your home. It's the place where you can be you most fully. It's your sanctum sanctorum. And certainly, you don't expect guests invited into your home to misbehave. They're in your place, and therefore they have to. It's obvious that they should treat you with respect, and not basically take a dump on the floor in your lair. Animals behave that way. They know that they don't go to some other animal's lair. They usually don't even go to each other's lairs. Like, that's a wise choice in the first place. But if they're there, they're certainly not going to be ruining it for the animal that created the lair. And that's a rule that we really want to live for.
And rule number 4 kind of goes along with that. If a guest in your lair annoys you, treat him cruelly and without mercy.
Exactly. Well, if somebody comes into your lair and behaves that way, they've earned it. And so if you go to a Satanist house and you act up, don't be surprised if you get kicked right out and thrown down the stairs, because you'll deserve it, every instant of it. And again, if people all did that, what an interesting world it would be.
Number 5. Do not make sexual advances unless you're given the mating signal.
What's really funny is that people often write to us and about that rule and go, well, what is the mating signal? And I'm tempted to say, well, it's when you stick 3 fingers up in the air and wiggle them around and then, stick out your tongue a few times. The real answer, of course, is that once you've passed puberty, it should be obvious what the mating signal is. It's clearly when somebody else shows a reciprocal interest in your lust after them. That's it. It's very simple. Like, is somebody responding sexually to your sexual approaches to them? And if you can't, anybody who's grown some hair on their body in those naughty bit spots should be able to tell what that is.
Number 6. Do not take that which does not belong to you unless it is a burden to the other person and he cries out to be relieved.
Yes, that's one that is a dangerous rule because people really have to be very careful about how to interpret it. It's against theft. Unless somebody has something that they really don't want and it is burdening them. Of course, if you take that, it isn't really necessarily theft because you are relieving somebody of something that's causing a hindrance to their lives. But that decision can't really be yours. It has to be theirs. Somebody might try to say, well, that person's wealth and they're being burdened by all of their money and I'm just going to take it from them. And the thing is, well, that might be your perspective, but it isn't necessarily theirs. So it's one that has to be dealt with very rationally and very carefully. And essentially the rule would be, unless you really know that somebody has something that's causing them harm and they know it, don't take it from them because then you'll just simply be a thief. And since we Satanists are very much interested in punishing thieves, you'd suffer accordingly.
Rule number 7 has to deal with magic, and we're going to touch on magic a little bit more in detail in the final segment of this show. But rule number 7 states, acknowledge the power of magic if you have employed it successfully to obtain your desires. If you deny the power of magic after having called upon it with success, you will lose all that you have obtained.
Well, that's an interesting rule because it works on a couple of levels. In magic, Satanists don't claim that necessarily magic is anything supernatural. It's really dealing with some obscure mechanisms that are part of the natural universe. What we've noticed is that people who are practitioners of magic, very interestingly, if things have come to them, if some largesse has come out of the universe towards them, and it's in answer to something that they've approached magically, if on some level they start to deny that the magic had anything to do with it, it starts to go away. And that's an interesting coincidence. It could be the result of their own psychology, that they are somehow suddenly denying a mechanism they set into motion towards obtaining those things. Then there could also be some subtler elements to it that really aren't magical, which we'll talk about in more detail in the next segment.
Rule number 8 states, do not complain about anything to which you need not subject yourself.
We Satanists hate whiners.
We certainly do.
And really, your life is in your own hands, essentially. We Satanists feel that you are your own God, and that means that you really have to take responsibility for everything. And nobody wants to hear you complaining about something that's in your power to change. If you really want to make the change, then do it. Don't sit around and complain about it.
Rule number 9, one that is pretty straightforward and self-explanatory. Do not harm little children.
So much for the allegations that we are out there to sacrifice little children. Yes. Satanists revere children. Like, we feel that they are the world's natural magicians because they haven't been perverted by spiritual doctrines. So, for the most part, we do cherish children and really want to see them grow into, hopefully, carnal and productive adults.
Rule number 10 kind of sort of coincides with rule number 9, and that is, do not kill non-human animals unless you are attacked or you need them for food.
Right. Well, we Satanists see ourselves as animals, so we feel a kinship to all the non-human animals that are out there. They're our brethren. They share this globe with us. We feel completely empathetic with them, and that means all kinds of animals. Like, essentially, the only way we'd kill them is because we need to survive. And the kind of needless cruelty that happens is usually done by people who are spiritual folk who feel that they aren't animals, or that they're somehow elect or above the animals. They feel that they have a justification because they're somehow superior, because of some kind of divinity. And again, we Satanists have to reject that idea as being absurd, and really just it brings so much suffering into the world from amongst humans and non-human animals. So you can clearly see why we'd want to advocate a rule like that.
And finally, rule number 11, when walking in open territory, bother no one. If someone bothers you, ask him to stop. If he does not stop, destroy him.
That's another one that people can often misinterpret because, again, it has to be taken very contextually. That's our philosophy of live and let live. We really want to keep our own arenas to ourselves. So we're out there, we're not interested in bothering people. Satanists aren't out there getting in people's faces and saying, you've got to be a Satanist, like we don't proselytize. And we expect the same from other people. Like, keep out of our faces. Go about your own business. If somebody starts bothering you, depending on the extent of how they're bothering you, you want to stop it. And the idea of destroying them can be seen on many different levels. If somebody is insulting you on the street, destroying them would be using your superior wit to cut them to ribbons verbally. If somebody is attacking you physically, essentially, if there's no law enforcement people around, you might have to use some kind of physical response to preserve yourself. Always, one has to keep in mind the rules of the nation in which one lives, because being responsible means being able to accept the consequences for whatever your actions are. So, we need to be very aware of our contexts when applying that rule. But it's one that we think is very healthy. And again, would really make a very interesting society if that was something that most people practiced. When we look at the Old West, we see that many people were armed. And that because they were armed, there was a great deal of politeness, of people trying to keep to their own territory. And when they interacted with other folks, they did so on an equitable level, because the potential for destruction was there. So that the idea of that kind of response from people, if somebody was annoying you, could lead to a much more balanced and polite civilization.
And we'll be back on Satanism Today here on freethoughtradio.com with High Priest Gilmore. And when we come back, we're going to talk about magic. And welcome back to Satanism Today on freethoughtradio.com. My name is David Harris, joined by High Priest Peter Gilmore. Now we come to the part that most freethinkers would scoff at. Most freethinkers would take a look at us and say, well, if you consider yourselves to be freethinkers, then why do you do this? And the thing that I'm talking about is magic. Now, according to the Satanic Bible, there are two forms of magic, that being lesser magic and greater magic. Why don't we start with a definition of what each of those means to us?
Well, in Satanism, the idea of magic is it's a tool for changing situations in the world to follow your will. Lesser magic is essentially a day-to-day manipulation of people so that they do what you want them to do and bring about results that you are seeking. Greater magic is ritual magic. It's essentially a process of psychodrama where we enter into an artificially created situation that's dramatic. It's a kind of theater of the emotions where we create an image of what we want to happen and expend our emotions in that, essentially to clear them from us so that we don't obsess over them in the course of our daily lives. But also, we think that on some level, that packaging and sending out of the emotions seems to reach out and influence people towards the ends that we seek. Now, as Satanists, we don't understand necessarily the mechanism in the natural universe that allows this to happen, and we'll talk maybe about some theories about that. But it's something that each person has to try for themselves and see if it has any validity. We don't claim any validity beyond the psychodrama of the ritual and its beneficial effects on the individual.
Now, sticking with lesser magic for a second. Generally what we're saying is that lesser magic constitutes our daily, day-to-day interaction with other members of the human species and getting them to sort of help us along in our daily tasks, or getting them to help us along within our life goals simply through coercion, as it were.
Essentially. Well, it's not... See, coercion may not be the appropriate word. It's more seduction and glamour. Because the point is to make people want to do what you want them to do, rather than to force them into doing it. Because coercion is essentially something that ceases to be effective once the influence that's making them do it is not present. Whereas if you use glamour to seduce people into wanting what you want, then you've given them the same desire. And whether you're there or not, they'll continue to pursue that and help you attain the ends that you're seeking. Now, on a day-to-day level, it can be something as simple as knowing to say the right word at the right time. It might be knowing how to dress properly for the right event. If you're going for a job interview, if you're going to a place that might be somehow upscale, you don't go wearing your sweatpants and turn-around baseball cap. So that seems like a simple thing. And again, in today's society where everybody thinks they're an individual and have the right to self-expression, they have to realize that there are often rules of the game for whatever game they want to play, and that lesser magic is knowing what those rules are and playing them better than anybody else, so you win the game. Because all of human interaction is a game. It's all social primate shenanigans. And to have the understanding of how they work and knowing how to play by those rules so that you win is essentially being a satanic magician.
Let's kind of move on to greater magic. Now, greater magic, again, as we talked about before, is the exorcising of our own individual emotions through a series of psychodramas in what we have come to term as a ritual chamber. Now, what would be some of the similarities and differences between something that we would construe as an exorcism of our emotions in our own ritual chambers versus the group doldrums that one may find inside the hallowed halls of any number of Christian, Catholic, or Jewish churches or synagogues?
Look, ritual practices in most religions are really not there to kind of create an emotional climax. Although I'd say that perhaps you can't say that of certain gospel churches, which are basically more like a performance that everybody's involved in. And again, satanic ritual is a performance. It's a theater piece in which there is no audience, there are only actors and participants. So there is an equivalency there, I'd say. But generally speaking, most people go to a service and find it rather dull. There's no real attempt to stimulate emotions on any level. It's usually some kind of rote text and rote responses that really often have no significance to the lives of the people. In satanic ritual, the ritual is about your life. When you're focusing on a goal that is part of your life's passions, you have to be stimulated. If you weren't, why would you even bother doing it? Whereas if you're going to church on the obligatory Sunday Mass schedule, there's nothing really compelling you to be there that you would find any emotional attachment to. See, more interestingly, what Satanism and its rituals is equivalent to is certain kinds of psychotherapy. Most people might find elements in their lives that they find are disturbing them. Their hatred for somebody, or their disgust at something, or their desires for something that they can't attain. And for a Satanist, instead of running to a therapist and whining to them about whatever is wrong with their lives, a Satanist will go into the ritual chamber and clear that stuff out of their emotional daily lives. If there's somebody bothering them, certainly as a Satanist, we don't stop our actions outside of the ritual chamber. We don't expect magically you're going to wiggle your nose like in Bewitched and suddenly the world is going to change. What we feel is that you clear away the emotions that might be clouding your judgment and your actions so that you're then free to take the most effective actions in the real world towards the goals that you're seeking. So it's really a kind of self-tune-up in the ritual chamber to sort of grease the skids for your success in whatever you're attempting outside of the chamber.
Well, we certainly hope to see you next week. You've been listening to Satanism Today on freethoughtradio.com.